Welcome Strategy Battle Gamers to another GBHL YouTube video. You're here with your host GBHL Tom on a single video, which is, well, I think that's pretty unprecedented, but I'm here to do an army showcase for you all. This is my Azog's Hunters army. I'm not quite alone though, because I'm actually, you can probably tell by the terrain, or maybe not, that I'm at Damien's house, GBHL Damien, and he's there beavering away studiously on his army for East Rivenstead. So to fill the time whilst he's being boring, I'm going to give you some content.
Woo, yeah, go Tom, woo!
Yeah, that's what you should be saying at the screen. So, Azog's Hunters, before I go into the actual models, is a pretty cool army, and it's just it's come out with The Hobbit, and it's expanded since. So in every source book from all the three films, we've acquired new profiles, which is pretty cool. And I've got a selection of models that span the range. So, what does my army consist of? Let's have a little pan over it. So on this side here, we have majority Gundabad warriors and captains. And then on the other side, we have the Hunter Orcs, and then in the centre we have Bulg. He's the army leader. Shameless plug to Barry O'Neill, thank you for the Weathertop. We thought we'd use it because it's a great backdrop, as are Damien's trees as well.
Woo, yeah, Barry, woo!
You're probably going to get fed up with Damien pretty quickly in this video. I also have tea, which is also good. Can't do a video without tea. So let's go into why I chose to play with this army or build and paint it. Well, I really like replicating moments from the films, and Damien had already painted Thorin's company and was going to embark on his what's it called, Army of Thror host. So that's all of the dwarf warriors. He was converting his Grimhammers into Erebor dwarves. So I needed a foil to that, something that could go up against what he was painting, so we could play through the scenarios. And that means doing Hunter Orcs and Gundabad warriors. As you can see, I've not yet done any mounted Hunter Orcs apart from Bulg, and I'll get onto that later in terms of what I'm going to do in the future. But for now, let's go and have a look at some of the warriors. So we'll start with the ones that were first released actually. Let's go with the Hunter Orcs. Now, I think originally there was maybe a bit of... so we just look at one closely. Can I get it to focus? I don't know how well that's focusing. It's hard with one hand to put your hand behind the screen to focus it very well. But yeah, these guys are really cool. I think there was a bit of debate at first. I'm not getting him to focus very well. There you go. As to the look of these, because they're a bit different to the way the Mordor Orcs look in terms of models. And in the films themselves, they don't look too dissimilar to the orcs from the Lord of the Rings. But when you actually look at these plastic kits, they're actually really super models. And they all have quite unique poses, which is really nice. And the way the sprue comes together is that you can pick and choose which bits go together, so you can really make your models stand out from one another in an army, which I think is really cool. They give you the options for bows, so even though these guys are absolutely terrible at shooting, I've put quite a lot of bows on them just because I think they look good. And for scenario play, you want some with bows. The really fun thing about the Hunter Orcs from a painting point of view is you can do some wall paint on their faces. I quite like that bit, and because you can use a spot colour like white, it means that it just stands out, which is nice. There you go. So, yes. Now, I've done a few conversions on the Hunter Orcs themselves. So, first up, let's go for the Hornblower. So, the Hunter Orcs have really bad courage. So, I wanted to give them a Hornblower to make sure that, well, they'd have a slightly better chance of staying around. So here is my Hornblower model. Let me try and focus on him. Now he is a normal archer, And what I've done is I've chopped the hand off. Can anyone guess which model this is from, actually? It's
Balrog.
no, it's not the Balrog. The Balrog doesn't have a horn, Damien. This horn...
Balrog's got 2 horns.
Oi. He's here all week. It's actually a Morgul Knight horn. Maybe the aesthetic doesn't quite work because it's a brass horn, and I imagine that the Hunter Ox would have a curved, not metal horn, let's put it that way. But I thought that, you know, my green stuffing ability isn't good enough to sculpt one, and I had this spare, so I thought that I could make do. So yeah, that's my first conversion. The second one is not really a conversion too much, but I wanted to make a captain model to lead my Hunter Orcs, and that's this guy here. And what I've done is I've chopped off, well, I've not chopped off a fell warg head, it came on the sprue. They give you different head poses and more than you need to make the models available in the fell warg set, in the mounted Hunter Orc set. Which is really cool because then you can use some of them to be, well, it's a little grotesque, but it is a dead fell warg head on his base, and that's to make him stand out as my captain. I've also given him this, what is amongst the other orcs really used as a two-handed weapon, but with the mounted Hunter Orcs you get the option for them to be holding it with just one hand, so I wanted to give him that. I'm not trying to be cheesy and give him it so he can piercing strike. Can you piercing strike with that? I expect so. But it was more just so he had a weapon that stood out a little bit. He doesn't just have the 2 sword blades. And obviously the obligatory war paint on his face. So I think he's quite cool. The final conversion is a banner bearer. Because the Hunter Orc models don't come with a banner, but they are able to take one. And that is this guy here. And again, I'll ask, can anyone tell where the banner's from?
Balrog.
Balrog doesn't have a banner. He's got no joke on that one either. The horns one worked well though.
Yeah.
It is a Rivendell Knight banner, which I filed down so that it didn't have the elven emblems on. And yeah, I think it works reasonably well in terms of him holding it. And I like to think that he's stolen it from the elves at some point and recoloured it to his Gundabad, or wherever he comes from, his colours. Now, the emblem I found quite tricky to think of what I wanted to do on the banner for the Hunter Orcs, because they don't really have a motif in the films particularly. I was toying with the idea of a white warg head, but that's quite tricky to draw freehand. And I couldn't really find... I tried to draw some on paper, but I couldn't really get a good design for the warg head as just an outline. So what I went for instead is this design, which is meant to represent the mountains of Gundabad. That's the there's 3 little triangles there, but then you'll also see the single line down and the middle bit made into a diamond, and that's representing the Eye of Sauron. So it's kind of a cross between Gundabad and the Eye of Sauron. And I can't say that I designed this completely myself. I had a look on the internet for different types of motifs, and I thought this one fit really well with the Gundabads. Cool. So that's the Hunter Orc portion. I think they're really nice models, and they were pretty good fun to paint. There's quite a lot of browns, which is always a bit difficult. Now, for those who don't know, I don't actually use Games Workshop paints, so when I'm putting together my models, I'm not going to be able to tell you what colours I used, because I actually use Humbrol enamel paints. Damien doesn't think much to that. Or Revel paints, you know, there are other brands available. So yeah, so all my colours are in terms of matte 84 or those kind of equivalents, and to be honest, I can never remember the numbers of my paints. I just know which ones I want and go on the shade of them and get them that way. So yeah, I did two skinned colour tones on the Hunter Orcs. There's this chap's type of colour tone, which is the green. Don't know how well you can make it out there. And then the other type was like the captain I had before, or, I mean, pick any of these guys, like this guy with the kind of pale brown. And I think I prefer the pale brown as a colour for these guys, but I think it's quite nice having a mix. The other colours I made, I know that these are meant to be bones within the armour, but I made these kind of leathery colour, reddy brown. So there's quite a lot of reddy brown on the kind of shin pads, the vembraces, and I made this the thing that comes around his neck a bit more red, so that they stand out a little bit more, and then I've given them a grey tunic as well. Cool, so I think that's probably it from the Hunter Orc side. How do they do in the game? They are they're pretty good with the 2 attacks. I mean, 2 attacks is always a very strong profile, and couple that with strength 4, and they are very good at killing stuff. The big issue with these guys is they've got terrible courage and fight value 3, so they're not quite up there with the Berserkers, the Feral Urukai, the Iron Guard, or the Reavers, because even with their 2 attacks, they can often lose fights due to their fight value, and they're absolutely crippled when they come up against terrifying opposition. I'm not a big fan of allying stuff together that shouldn't be allied, and I'm not a big fan of shamans in general, so there's no way I'm putting a shaman with these guys to make them effective. I like to kind of try to get the best out of an army list as it's intended to be used, so yeah, I've played with them before and had some reasonable success with them, but it really depends who you come up against. I came up against the Army of the Dead and they were awful against them because they couldn't charge. So yeah, let's move on to the Gundabad warriors. Now, unlike the Hunter Orc set, which came in plastic, these guys are sadly expensive. Hunter Orcs, I mean, they're expensive relative to the old Lord of the Rings models, but because you can get them in a box of 12, they're not too bad in terms of relative price to current models. Whereas the Gundabads came in the clan packs of 3 for 15 Great British pounds, which is expensive, and as you can see I've got a fair few of them here. So yeah, why have I bought so many? Well, there's a few inspirations. One is obviously you need quite a lot of these guys to be able to fight the Battle of 5 Armies, so that was one inspiration for getting a lot of them. And also the Battle of Azog at Dimble Dale in the kind of flashback in the film. But there were a couple of people, Tom Robinson from Slayer Gaming and also Tom Thorpe, I think, had both got an army of Gundabads at Throne of Skulls last year, and they both looked really, really good, and it kind of made me want to get more of these guys, because originally I'd just bought one warband because I thought that was all I was going to do with these guys. But yeah, to kind of beef up my army to take on Damien's, and because of seeing these other guys' armies, I thought that I'd get more of these, and I think they're great models. Now, the way that I've painted these, so one caveat to the thing I said before, in that I don't have Games Workshop paints, is that I do use their washes now, because the thing with enamel paints is that you have to use terps, which for a start stinks, so it makes painting perhaps less enjoyable, or at least certainly for people around you. So Lily tends not to like to be in the same room as me when I'm doing painting, so...
And at other times.
Hey, he's still here. So yeah, that is... that's the big downside of terps. But the other thing is it's quite hard to get a wash right, because essentially you're using dirty terps, and whilst that's... hey. whilst that is... whilst that, you know, it has the same effect as a wash, the issue is that it's hard to get the right consistency, whereas across all of your models, whereas with the washes, because they're kind of measured in terms of how much colour there is in them, it makes things a lot easier to get that consistency across your models. So I have used both Agrax Earthshade and Null Oil on these guys, and as you can probably tell, they look quite dark, so I wanted to go for quite a dull look on these guys, because they're evil and they look quite like Urukai in the films. I wanted to make sure that they had that feel, that kind of dirty armour feel. So I've kind of highlighted the edges of the armour. I don't know how well that's focusing. So the only bit of colour really are this red bit of cloth that they have dangling down across their private area. And then the colours, I've done the same again, the same green and browns for the skin colours, but because they've got so much armour on, there's not that much skin colour involved with these guys. Now, because these guys are fine cast, some of them are a bit flimsy, so I have bent quite a lot of them into shape, but you'll see here, this guy's spear has since gone back to its original bendy way, so I'll have to get some hot water on that one. But also the issue is that this chappie here, where is his original pose? I've got a few of them. I know this is great content because I'm not pointing at the army whilst I'm getting these. I'm trying to find them. Yeah. So this chap here, he has a particular type of sword that he's holding when you get the actual model, and it's really, really flimsy and it breaks off. So every time I've got this model, I've replaced his sword because the Hunter Orc packs are so great, the plastic packs that you get lots of extra weapons so you can choose what you want to put on them, so it means that you've got lots of spares to do conversions with. So this chap, I've given him the same as what the captain had. Obviously he can't piercing strike because in his war gear it specifies that he has a sword, so this was done purely because I thought it looked cool. And this chap's quite nice in that you can have his arm turned down or turned up, and I think both poses look good. So this is the arm facing down a bit, whereas this chap, he's got the arm up, but it's the same model. And this time I have given him a sword from the Hunter Orcs. Same again with sword from the Hunter Orcs, but a slightly different sword this time. And then this one is pointing down again, as if he's about to stab. Cool, so then the next pose, because you only get 3 poses of each swordsman and spearman in this set because of the nature of the fine cast clan packs. There's this chap I've shown before who's running forward with his sword raised. I tried one conversion on that one where I've got his sword pointing forward rather than up. It didn't work as well as I'd have liked, but I've only done one of him. I think he's okay, at least it gives a little bit of variation to the army. And the final pose is this chap who has his sword pointing out. He's got the big head crest on. I think he's quite cool. He's got the same flimsy sword, but it tends to be better than the other pose in terms of sticking together. What I've done on a few of them actually is change their helmet slightly, so this one doesn't have the big helmet. He has had his kind of chopped off, and that's because sometimes the fine cast is quite brittle in places, and when you tried to file it, a little chunk will break off, and whilst you could sometimes make a chink in them, I thought it'd be cool just to have some of the helmets looking a bit different anyway. So that's one. If we go on to the spearman, then this is probably my favourite spearman pose. He has the big, again another big head crest on his helmet, but I like the pose in terms of the spear pointing up. You can see the red again, and yeah, I think he's a good model. But again, his head crest is a little bit flimsy sometimes, so there's a couple of them where I've had to shorten the point on it here, which again, I'm not, you could start writing to Games Workshop and saying, well, the head crest was a bit flimsy, blah blah blah, but I think it's quite nice to have a bit of variation. I've kind of shown this guy before, but this is one. No, he's still got a bendy spear. I have one without a bendy spear here. This chap. This is the one where I think Jamie calls him the man with the axe in his head or something like that. But I don't particularly mind the pose. I think it looks maybe a bit duck-like, but I still think he's cool enough. And the final pose is this chap, who I'm dropping. Again with a big head crest. He's kind of pointing forwards. So yeah, those are the Gundabad warriors. I think they're cool models. In terms of in-game effectiveness, they're essentially Uruk-hai, but they only have fight 3, which is really disappointing. It means that they're far less effective than the Uruk-hai. They do get ancient enemies, which means they can reroll 1s against elves and dwarves. But the annoying thing about that is that for the swordsmen, at least anyway, they'd be feinting against them anyway. But it does give a little bit of a boost to the spearmen. So at least it's quite a nice themey rule. But yeah, for the 10 points, they are reasonably expensive. But the defense 6, when coupled with the hunter orcs, can be quite effective because at least it gives some sort of shield and durability to this army, which you don't get from the hunter orcs. They're very much more of a glass cannon. So yeah, those are the Gundabads. Now I have 2 captains. First one is the standard captain model that comes on his own in a Finecast pack. Sometimes likened to Mickey Mouse because of the helmet. But I actually really like this pose. There's Damien's Mickey Mouse impression. I really like this pose. I think he's a really, really good model. Very heroic stance with the sword aloft. So yeah, I think he's great. There he is in focus. Now again, he's very much like an Uruk captain, who are kind of famed for being very good captain models. Now this guy still is good in that he has the strength 5 and he has the defense 7, but he's only a fight value of 4, which is a bit of a letdown again, because he's going to find it harder to chop through normal troops if he's coming up against a fight 4 army. But yeah, lovely model. Don't really care about these guys' effectiveness because I just like to use them anyway. Now the final captain guy that I've got is a conversion. So let's see if I can get him in focus. So this guy was inspired by a captain that we saw in the film very briefly when Bulg rides back to Azog following his adventures in Lake Town with Legolas and Tauriel, and has to tell Azog that he didn't kill them actually, and that Azog's a bit peeved because an army of elves is going to come now. So he sends Bulg off to Gundabad to get the extra orcs because, you know, if the elves weren't coming, why bother getting them to come to the battle? You know, bit of a waste of their time. But anyway, this chap is in the background and kind of walks on he's kind of the chief of all the Gundabad's, kind of, I guess, the big captain after Azog and Bulg. So how have I put this guy together? I'm not getting to focus very well, so sorry about that, guys. That's a bit better. So here we can see him. He has a very Uruk-hai-like helmet. Now, it's not exactly how it was in the films. In the films, it goes, the crest goes even further down, so it's kind of 90 degree, it's kind of horizontal when the crest finishes, and it's perhaps a little bit more towards his eye level than I have it here. But I've used the old Uruk head from the conversion set that came with the Battle Games in Middle-earth for this. But what I've done is I've drilled 2 holes through his helmet, because the one in the film, it's not like an Uruk-hai crest, it actually sits on top of these kind of supports rather than being straight out of the helmet. Then he has, so in the film he has a kind of curved spear. Now this isn't quite as curved as it is in the film, but it's the best I could do with what I've got, and this is a Morgul Knight lance. And the reason I have one left over is because I made a captain model out of the Morgul Knight set, which has, and he has a sword, so I had one left over. So I thought that was pretty cool as a weapon. I had to use green stuff to reposition the arms of this chap as he kind of goes out of focus again. Oh, come on. I'm struggling on focus. But yeah, I had to use green stuff to get the arms into the pose that I wanted. Fortunately, this guy comes from an original Gundabad, and fortunately the pose of the Gundabad was such that he was looking down. It's the one like this chap. So as you can see, he's looking down. So that meant that I could raise him up on a slanted bit of rock, and he'd be looking up, but not ridiculously so. And the legs were kind of posed well, so that I can just put it on without having to reposition the legs. So that was quite handy. Now, I've also, because obviously the captain can't take a spear or lance or whatever on foot, I've put a sword on his back. And now this sword is from the Gundabad General model, or the old Bulg model. And I got this because I didn't really feel the need to put him on the back of the Gundabad General model. He already had his big two-handed burly pickaxe or whatever. What do you call it, Damien?
Pick.
Just pick.
I meant choose one and move on. I meant choose one and move on.
Oh, choose one and move on. Oh, as in pick one. Oh, you said. God dear. Things I have to put up with. So yeah, I saved him for something in the future on a rainy day, and this is what the sword got put onto. So as you can see, it's the same colour scheme as my other Gundabads, with this dirty armour and the red cloth. Shout out to Jay Finnegan. You've seen his army, the Rivendell Knights, with Gilgalad, etc. I think that was the first army showcase that James did. But he sent through to me some resin bases, and here is one put to use already. They're actually meant to be elven, as you can see from the patterns, but I thought that it looked cool, and it gave this guy more of a heroic stance. So yeah, that is my Gundabad captain. Or both of the captains, but that's the converted one. So the final piece of this army is Bulg, and this guy is now a beast because he can be taken on a warg. Now, the weird thing is that his warg is absolutely huge and on a frankly ridiculously shaped base. But we'll get onto him in a minute because I'm going to start with the foot model, which I was really looking forward to this guy coming out because we had obviously the Gundabad General pose as Bulg originally. We didn't have Bulg from the films, and I was really pleased when this guy came out because it means you can do the scenarios like the barrels out of Bond as it was in the film. I think that this guy he looks really good on foot. His pose is really nice, striding forward with his huge weapon. The armor's cool. So yeah, again, I kind of mimicked the dull armor colour of the Gundabads for him, but he obviously stands out from the army because of his lighter skin tone. So I'm really useless at painting white, so this is worked from browns, and I've gone through to it's a mixture of the brown that is on the base, a creamy colour, and white all mixed in one. And I could not tell you the proportions, could not tell you the exact colours. I just kind of do it, and I know if it's a little bit lighter or not when I do the next highlight. There's also Agrak's Earthshade Wash kind of worked into that as well. This guy's a little tricky though because of the metal across his face. As you can see in the metal, kind of the skin coming into gaps in his armour, so he does take a little care and attention. But I hope that his face has come out reasonably there. You can see his eyes and the one dead eye. Now his little cloth here is a little weird, so you can see there's one skull in the middle, but if you look down in the bottom two, it looks like faces to me. Now I didn't want to paint these as if they were faces, but it does look as if the way they patterned his cloth, that it's kind of stitched together with faces, but they are.
Skin dwarf faces.
Yeah, skin dwarf faces, but I think that's a little bit gross, so I've just made it cloth. But yeah, that is Bulg. Really cool model. And yeah, this is the Desolation of Smaug Bulg. He changes his armour slightly in the Battle of the Five Armies, but you wouldn't really notice on the tabletop, but if you do look at close-up stills, you'll notice that he's not quite the same as in the Battle of the Five Armies, but I think it's absolutely fine to use this model as a Battle of the Five Armies Bulg. So this guy is really expensive in terms of his points. And whilst he was on foot from the original Hobbit and Unexpected Journey release, he really struggled to get up to that mighty hero level of killing 10 enemy models. Because whilst on foot, he didn't have very good manoeuvrability to get to the places he needed to kill the easy stuff, and also he could easily be tagged by an enemy hero and would get bogged down. So what he was crying out for really was a warg, and he was on a warg in the film, so it was a great relief that they brought him out with a warg. So here is Bulg again, but this warg is huge. It's bigger than the white warg if you do a comparison. So yeah, I don't particularly like the warg. I think he's come out alright when he's painted, but if it was me, I would like him on a smaller warg. I just didn't really want to chop him up and put him on one. I'd like to see someone try and put this guy on the Wild Warg Chieftain. I think that would be a cool conversion. But yeah, it's the exact same model really as the foot version. So I painted him exactly the same. It was difficult to get the skin exactly the same. I think I've got it pretty close. I think this guy might be slightly lighter than the other guy, than the foot version, but all much for muchness. And again, you can see his dead eye and the one eye. And I think he's a really cool model to lead the army. So there you have it. That is the Azog's Hunter army that I've been putting together recently. I say recently, I started doing the Hunter Orcs before the Desolation of Stockport and a Warband of Gundabads. When would that have been? That was... When was that? September?
I think you did them in August.
August.
Your hobby blog in issue 1 is you putting the models together.
Yeah, in issue 1 of the SBG magazine, I have... You can see the banner bearer and the Hunter Orc hornblower in here. So yeah, it was around that time, so just before Desolation of Stockport, that I was doing the first of these guys, and I've recently been painting up the rest of the Gundabad and the Captain and Bulg, because I wanted this army to grow. So this is a selection of these models will be taken to East Rivenstead. I'll be taking Bulg mounted, 2 of the Gundabad captains and the Hunter Orc captain, and then kind of, I think it's about 22 Gundabad warriors and 14 Hunter Orcs plus the Hunter Orc banner bearer. That will be my army. So, what is... does this army have more future? Yes, it does. I'm going to be painting... I have Azog and the White Warg to paint. So I have Azog on the White Warg, I have a spare White Warg, and I have Azog on foot. Now the reason I have a spare White Warg is not because I'm really flippant with my money, it's because Lily sadly knocked my original Azog mounted whilst hoovering and broke him. But the Warg was all intact, so I just chopped off the kind of broken Azog and made him into the White Warg, and gave him an excuse really to do what I thought was too frivolous to do originally, and buy 2 just so I could get the White Warg on as a dismount. So just, I do have Damien's lovely, beautifully painted Azog here. I just wanted to bring him in just to give you a size comparison to Bulg. So you can see that the Warg is actually, if I go down to ground level, is actually taller. Well, it's certainly longer, the one that Bulg is on. Bulg sits slightly higher than Azog. And then from above, in terms of the bases, I mean, Bulg's base is just ridiculous. I mean, Azog's was big and a bit out there, but Bulg's is very odd. So it's going to be interesting. I've not played with him yet. I'm going to be playing with him for the first time at East Rivenstead. And I'm gonna find it interesting, I think, trying to get his base through gaps. Because usually, if you kind of charge 2 models together, so let's say we charge Azog into foot version of Bulg, there's an issue here because Azog's Warg's head is going to hit Bulg. So what you do when these 2 models go together in the game is you just rotate Azog slightly. Because he's got a round base, it makes not one bit of difference when you do that. The issue is when you get to Bulg, charging Bulg on foot, the warg. Oh, I mean, in this example, it doesn't really matter, but we need a model leaning forward. Here, let's say he can't fit in because of the shield of the Gundabad with the warg's head. You can't just rotate the head of the warg out of the way, because then he's actually moved a different amount because of the way the base is shaped. So what you'd have to do is instead pick him up completely and put him backwards. So that's a bit of a pain. I am definitely more of a fan of round bases. But hey ho. So yeah, the rest that I've got to get done is I've got the mounted contingent of the Hunter Orcs. So that is, I think I've got 12 mounted Hunter Orcs. And I think I've got the dismounting Fell Wargs as well, which can either act as dismounts or as lone Fell Wargs. So yeah, and then, and obviously Fimble, Azog and Yazneg, and I think they're all superb models. The only problem with Azog, I've put them together, they're all undercoated, ready to be painted, is that Azog's sword is very, very, well, sword bow, if you look at it closely, is very, very flimsy. And I'm worried about that. I think, did it snap off? It was either in the process of potentially snapping off, or it has snapped off and I've fixed it, but it's not particularly stable, which is a shame. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my ramblings about my Azog's Hunters army. I hope you enjoy these army showcase series. I have quite a lot more armies that I could go take you through if you're interested. Yeah. Says Damien. But yeah, this is the project that I've been working on recently, and I'm quite happy with it. And I think it's a pretty cool army to play with. Just terrible when it's broken because everything runs away, and terrible going up against anything terrifying. But the Strength 4 does make it quite fun, and the squishy Hunter Orcs they kill a lot, they die quickly, it makes for a fun game. So yeah, there you go. So what do we say as ever, Damien?
Don't forget to comment, like, share and subscribe.
Yep, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Support your Hobbit hobby, and happy strategy battle gaming, guys.